welcome to our 135th episode of Guerrilla Radio. I'm Joe Caprino, and I have a special, in many ways, guest, Chris Fleeger, head coach at the Midwest Regional Training Center. I almost screwed that up. We're going to talk some youth wrestling. Welcome, Mr. Fleeger. How are you today?
Doing good. How are you?
I am great. Got a special episode on a Good Friday since I don't have to work, and so we're gonna get this out. And Chris is trying to get a lot of privates done, and some training, so people can have Sunday off. You're gonna give your guys Sunday off, or you let them?
We're getting soft.
Nice. So we're gonna talk a little bit about youth wrestling. I know there have been some Facebook posts that were very interesting this about a month ago. So we're gonna talk a little bit to Chris about his philosophies, kind of what he is implementing at the Midwest RTC, and kind of some things about his experience and all that stuff. So we're going to dive right into it. He tell us about, I guess, what kind of accomplishments. I know, like in college and high school, kind of what you did in Pennsylvania. We'll start off with that first.
Want me to list them?
Yeah, I mean, just an overview, I guess.
Yeah, I was a state champ in Pennsylvania. I won Fargo. I won the cadet nationals, the junior nationals. I was on the cadet world team, junior world team, university world team, university national champ, SBAR national champ back when they had that. They did away with that. University national champ, then Big Ten champ, third at the University Worlds, three-time All-American, second at the NCAAs, third at the Pan Ams.
So a little bit of experience competition-wise. Yep. So you were on the cadet and junior world teams?
Yep.
Oh, nice. Yep. Yes. And then the SBAR was basically junior too, wasn't it? As far as like
under
20. Okay.
Yeah. So SBAR nationals. Yeah, it was weird back then, but and I was always bumping up. So I won. I was on the cadet world team my first cadet year. My second cadet year, then I went to the junior world team, and then when I was the older junior world, when I could have been on the junior world team, I went to the university worlds.
Okay.
Placed at the university worlds, which is U25 worlds now. When I believe I was 18 or 19. Yeah.
Okay. So a lot of, not only experience in the in state or in the country, you also went across the world, which is pretty cool that wrestling can I always, look at like Sarah Hildebrandt and Kayla Miracle, how much wrestling has taken them across, filling up a passport to be able to just for wrestling, which is pretty cool. So, when did you get started wrestling, and how and when did you start wrestling?
Yes, I started wrestling decently late. It was like right before fifth grade, going into fifth grade. I was pretty lucky. I started because I thought it was the WWF. Me and my buddies, the WWF. We went to our local school. They were having a tryout. I'm like, dude, I'm going to hit someone in the sharpshooter. So we went, and they just did like I don't know if it was 6 weeks or something like that, small camp or whatever. And I didn't like it at first. I was like, Mom, this is not real wrestling. This is the fake stuff. Where there's no turnbuckles. My mom's like, that's fine, but you got to finish the commitment. You can't quit. So I did it. And by the end, I'm like, man, I really like that. So I want to do it again, but the school's like, no, we're not going to do it. The participation was pretty low. So then my mom found the local YMCA had just started a program. And the guy that ran the YMCA, he had two sons, Mike and Tommy Waldron, that ended up winning state for my high school. But their dad had went and got this Russian guy to leave the USSR Olympic coaching staff and come to America, Alex Lederman. So he was my first real coach, was this, Olympic Russian coach. Like, guy didn't speak English. He was super cruel, but he ended up being awesome, amazing. So I was pretty lucky. But yeah.
Nice. What so where is, I guess, where you went to Loyalstock?
Loyalstock.
Where in Pennsylvania is that?
It is in kind of north central, I guess you could say. Williamsport is the city right there. It's the greater Williamsport area. That's where the Little League World Series is.
So right there. It was nowhere Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
When did you really start taking it, I guess, seriously and starting like, I mean, obviously you didn't have much room before you started actually having some success at like fifth grade. When did you kind of really start like doing a lot of off season and clubs and things like that?
So right away, my Russian coach was just like, you dive in, you just go. My first year, I did everything: freestyle, Greco, folk style. We actually wrestled a little bit of sambo because he had some sambo background, which we just did that for a little bit until he realized Americans are just not going to come to sambo practice. So that
Nice.
real quick. But yeah, we just dove right in. I think my first year or two, I might have played like a little baseball, a little football, and then like I just, splitting time was just not a thing. So my Russian coach was like, be passionate and do it. If you're going to do it right. So we got into it right away. And then I really didn't have a lot of success until my freshman year in high school. I was really unknown. And my first state title was in high school. I never won a youth state title. Pennsylvania, they have that like JOs, which is like the youth kind of state, big JOs. I never qualified for it.
Oh, wow.
My eighth grade year, a kid named Rocky Anderson tech followed me to qualify for it. I didn't even qualify. Yeah.
Nice. So then it kind of just things started clicking at your freshman year a little bit more then.
Yeah, and I kind of tell some of my guys this. I was pretty good positionally, certain positions, but I wasn't great at necessarily tying them together or getting in them. And if they all lined up, I'd wrestle good. If I missed a little piece, I wrestled bad. So I was pretty good positionally. And then when I got into high school, I kind of filled in the gaps and started stringing that stuff together. And my results went way up, but my wrestling maybe just went up a little bit, filling in little gaps and little details, and it made the complete picture.
Yeah. So you end up coming to Purdue. How did Purdue get on the radar? Obviously a two-time Pennsylvania state champ. I'm sure you had a lot of people looking at you Big Ten wise, and Pennsylvania has about 6 dozen D1 programs. So what made you come head to the beautiful state of Indiana, God's country?
Uh, yeah, I was on the junior world team in 10th grade, and Jesse Reyes was the coach at Purdue, and he was the coach of the world team. The trials were at Purdue. So I got to see the campus. He was my coach, and I was the only high school kid on the team. Everyone else was in college. So he spent obviously a ton of time with me. He was a great technician. I mean, his technique was really good. I liked Big Ten. I wanted to be at the pinnacle of the sport, which was Big Ten. So I knew I wanted to go Big Ten. I came from a really small town. I live in a small town now. I like small towns. I hate cities. So I wanted that small town feel, Big Ten, just everything kind of lined up. If I would go back, I probably would change some of the things of how I made my decision. But that brought me to Purdue.
Okay. So then after you were a three-time All-American, two-time runner-up, and then you end up coaching a little bit Division I, NAI level. You were at Cumberland's.
Into junior college.
Yeah, and junior. Okay, yes, and the junior college in what, Georgia?
Georgia, yep.
Yeah. So, what was, I guess, between D1 and NAI level? It's always, I wrestled at a smaller school level. We NAI D2. What was the biggest difference between like D1 and NAIA?
And there's a lot of differences. It's the Wild West in the NAIA. There's no rules. It's just it's pretty crazy. And a lot of those programs. So when I took over the NAIA program that I did, the blueprint for being successful in the NAIA was you print out all the Division I rosters and you check it every month and see one. And when someone drops off, you contact them and get them to transfer. And you are basically just sucking up good kids and trying to win off of those. And I said, I don't want to do that. I really don't want to live on the transfer game. I don't want to recruit junior college kids. I want to create a culture where these guys come here and they, want to develop here, not just good coming in. So it's the Wild West, and usually the biggest difference is there's some talented kids. There really is a lot of talent in all those Division II, Division III. The depth isn't quite as good, and typically the commitment of the kids. Division I, those coaches really demand, the majority of your time. NAIA, the kids go home in the summer, they go home for breaks, and the off season, the programs don't demand as much time, I would say, but NAI or scholarships. than Division One. That the academic standards are probably a little bit more stringent, or at Division One. But that's not to say that an NAI can't get a really good degree and take it seriously. But those are usually the differences. So
Yeah, no, I'm sure that was a little bit of a culture shock going from when you're coaching and wrestling at D1, then going to the NAI level and seeing not only the level of the kids, but also that just everything that goes on there. I know it's that's you don't see very many D1 guys go down to the NAIA or D2, D3 level to coach very often.
I always felt that I was a little different coming up through. Like when I was ranked one in the nation in high school, I didn't feel like I had to go to a big program because the big name program. I'm gonna be successful wherever I go. When I was a Division One coach, a lot of people are like, just go and get a Division One assistant job, because I was probably another step or two from being a serious candidate for a Division One head job. But I'm like, no, I want to be a head coach. So I went to Cumberland's, and I'm like, I don't care if I'm in the NAI. I'm gonna coach wrestling and do what I love and try to make it at a high level and create a really good atmosphere. And I think I did that, but I didn't need to be a Division One. Because I can still coach wrestling. And to me, coaching in the NAI was a lot more rewarding. Division One, those kids, are very talented. But most of those kids, I don't know. I don't know how much of an impact you make on those kids versus an NAIA kid. I think the impact's a lot bigger at the NAIA level. I felt like I had a better rapport with those kids. I made a bigger impact. It was more enjoyable as a coach.
Yeah, definitely. It's really interesting to hear, because obviously someone like you would be probably had, like you said, you had a lot of offers probably to be an assistant coach D1, and that's where you don't see, if you do see a D1 guy coaching the lower tiers, usually they don't have, they're not usually All-Americans or finalists. They're guys that were probably either qualifiers or maybe practice fodder, for lack of better words. But that's pretty interesting. So we're going to talk a little bit about youth wrestling after we got, a little bit of your background and stuff. Obviously, you said you started at like 5th grade. So you weren't like these 5-year-olds that are going through all the rigors of getting a lot of matches and stuff. What, I guess, when you were early on, like you're through your middle 5th through, on up, how many matches were you getting, in a year approximately?
So my Russian coach, the Russians, they don't wrestle that many matches.
Mm-hmm.
He was really discouraging about wrestling too many live matches, especially with the younger you were. Like, you always hear this 100 match. That's what I would always hear from all the local people. My coach was like, that's silly. Back then it was hard to even get that many matches, but that's what I would always hear, 100. The most I ever probably got was maybe 70, maybe 80. I don't think I ever even got that many, but typically it would be lower than that. I'm against wrestling that many live matches. My Russian coach was against it. His thing was, why are you wrestling a live match? Why are you going out to compete? Are you going out to see what you need to fix? And that's what you should be doing. You should be going out and wrestling matches to see what you need to work on and then going and working on them. Mm-hmm. And that's what he was big in. And if you're wrestling every weekend, when are you working on things?
Yeah. Yeah.
You're just not. So he was big into that. And, you can't compete your problems away. I think a lot of people get into that almost like they're on tilt. They go compete, they lose. I got to go right back out and compete again. They lose. I got to go compete. And it's silly to me, and I think that, and I try to explain to some parents, when you wrestle live, it's not a controlled atmosphere, when you're out there in competition, and you can win on some pretty crazy things, especially at the youth level. 90% of matches are won on speed, aggression, and strength, not technique. So, if you could cover up a lot of mistakes, but when you're in a competition and you hit something successfully, it really just ingrains it deeper into your, subconscious and your habits. And most of the time, they're bad habits. So when you wrestle a lot of live matches, you are building bad habits deeper and deeper. And I always tell our guys, I would rather start with a kid with no wrestling experience than a kid that has really deep bad habits. You're going to take so long to get them out of that. So I really lead to a negative in your wrestling. I truly believe it.
Yeah. I like, Moran Karshalava. He in Ohio, I know he had a lot of that same philosophy with his son, and even in his club, which is obviously they're both from your coach and him, both from Russia and that kind of background. That's very interesting to hear. So, I guess what do you kind of recommend as far as starting out and stuff? I asked this mainly for everybody, but also I have a son that's starting to get into the sport and stuff, and he's done a couple years of practice and now started to do some local real small events and stuff. What age do you recommend to start, and then kind of how many live matches, that kind of stuff what kind of stuff do you recommend for, I guess, start like 8U, which is about fourth grade and under, third or fourth grade, then 12U, which is about sixth grade, and then like middle school and stuff. And what's like progression as far as what you think for like little kids?
And my progression comes off of what my Russian coach did. And I started a little bit later, but I saw what he did with some of the other kids. The younger they were, the less wrestling they did and the more gymnastics they did. So he was really big into basically a general athletic progression plan. So he was really trying to teach kids, balance, moving your feet, coordination, a little core strength, and that stuff is going to help you execute technique later on. So he was really big into the younger you were, 6, 7, 8-year-olds, they weren't doing a lot of wrestling. They were, doing rolls and flips and cartwheels. You see when I post on Instagram a lot, we have our guys do that quite a bit. Just we want them to be, smart with their bodies, know how their bodies move, have agility, have balance. It's going to help with injury prevention. It's going to help execute technique later in life. So 8 and under, I really just don't wrestle them a lot. We do a lot of, the agility, the strength stuff. And then as they start getting 8, getting more serious into it, and then, kind of going from there. I mean, basically once they're at that age, it's kind of up to the kids. I think that there's not a perfect plan for everyone. Everyone's on their own little journey. There's 8-year-olds that are super mature. There's 8-year-olds that are not mature. Yes. I believe that you have to learn to learn. And you have 10-year-olds that can't learn. You have 8-year-olds that can. So every kid's going to be a little bit different. What the general rule I tell our guys is like, hey, get in there, start with 2 days a week and then ramp it up from there as they're, emotionally able to do it. And then competition, I usually encourage 4 to 6 weeks in between competitions. Some kids will go a little longer, if they are mature enough to appreciate the process, they'll go a little longer. Some kids, if you see, hey, this kid's kind of dying off, he needs a little competition to ignite the fire, take him out and compete. But we don't have kids competing every weekend. We just don't.
Yeah. Interesting. So so like you said, no cookie cutter. There's no cookie cutter. And that's one thing you see with some kids. I see it at the little tournaments that we've been going to where, you have some kids that are ready and some kids that, have no business competing even at the 5, 6, 7, 8-year-old level. Like they're afraid of their own shadow, and that's not going to do any good. Not do it the kid any good or anybody any good, even his opponent who pins him in 15 seconds.
What does that do for anyone?
Yeah. So it's interesting. And you'll see some kids at that youth level that are a little more advanced, and then they're wrestling those kids like that like you have no business being at this tournament, let alone the other kid. Also both ends of the spectrum. So what I guess you kind of dove into it. What's I guess is your number of matches and frequency versus match frequency versus training. Kind of I know you kind of dive into a little bit further, like as you get like you said, like 10 and under, middle school, high school level. What's kind of your thinking on that kind of stuff?
And once again, it's going to be different for every kid. Our more advanced kids compete less. I think you see it, at our Olympic level, guys are competing a lot less. You see colleges, the top colleges, I think some of it's probably seed protection, pulling guys out. But I think the majority of it is just keeping guys fresh, and they just don't need to compete that often. So the better our guys are, the less they're competing. If they're ramping up for a national competition, we're going to, probably not compete a lot, get them ready for the national competition. The little less experienced guys, we'll feed them to some of those local tournaments. But I typically say 4 to 6 weeks minimum. You should go out, you should see what do you need to work on? What are you losing on? Develop a plan, fix those things. And the next time you go out, are you still losing on the same things? When you're inexperienced, losses are not a big deal. If you lose on in a row, that's a bad sign. If you're losing on different things every time, hey, I fixed one thing. Now I'm going to fix another. Now I'm going to fix another. That's what you should be doing.
Interesting. So like high school age, like your more advanced guys, you're still saying don't compete very often as far as, get a few local tournaments in and then go. So you're not a big fan of the ISWA's two tournament minimum to go to state.
I'm not, but I do. I understand it. I do. I understand, and I support what they do. They're doing the best they can. I think that there's some guys that need that. It's good to help the local tournaments get participation up, but I'm not.
I mean, at that level, it's not going to be as intense. I mean, there's a difference between a local tournament versus a regional or state level or national level tournaments too, as far as intensity and all the stuff that goes into that. So, what kind of like intensity do you see like for training? Like, is it a lot of live? Is it a lot more drilling, situations, kind of stuff? What kind of things? I know we were talking a little bit off the air about it, but what's kind of your philosophy on like the training and kind of what goes into your practices?
Yeah, I mean, I think I see no reason you can't be pretty intense with your training. Our guys work really hard from a young age. I think we try to instill hard work. I think there's a societal thing right now where it's like you can't push kids, you can't. I don't buy into that. I think that you need to teach the kids the hard work, and they can work hard from a young age. And I don't think there's anything wrong with wanting your kid to be a hard worker and wanting your kid to be, an elite athlete. Some people are like, oh, I don't care if my kid's good at wrestling or is an elite athlete. I just want him to have fun. Like your job as a parent should not, number one, be your kid has fun. Right? Like you need to make them eat vegetables when they don't want to. They have to go to bed at a certain time. They can't play video games all the time. Your job is to, prepare them to be successful adults, and part of that is learning discipline, learning hard work, learning that when things aren't fun, you don't just quit.
Yeah.
That's a big deal. That's a big deal. Yeah. At the end of the day, I hope you enjoy hard work, you enjoy the process, but sometimes you're not going to, and you shouldn't have to quit. So we do. We ramp it up pretty hard from a young age. We do strength and conditioning for all of our guys. From a younger age, we do a lot of the Bosu ball work. Get on the stability ball, the sling balls. I'll throw those around, push-ups, and then they'll progress into heavier weights, tires, weightlifting. Usually in middle school. Late middle school, but they'll do that, and then they'll do wrestling practices, and they're intense. I don't see any issue with having pretty hard and intense workouts when you're younger. You can do it in a positive way. I'm not going to yell at a kid and just there's going to be some tears, and explain to them it's part of the process, and do it in a loving way. But you should be able to push your kid.
Yeah. How much like of your practices are more drilling versus live versus teaching, that kind of stuff?
So we do 2-hour practices, and it cycles through the year. Sometimes we'll do, a little bit more agility stuff. I would say the bulk of it is going to be drilling. We 2-hour practice. We're going to drill for an hour, 15, hour and 30. A lot of drilling. When we're in our positional live stuff, we'll do that takes a little longer. So we'll go 30 minutes live sometimes on that, but we're not spending more than 30 minutes live ever on a live in a practice. That's a lot as it is, and I'm skeptical about doing that sometimes. I want to tone it down. It's just drilling. Controlled environment, quality reps.
As you get closer to like a big competition, like I guess Fargo or like a middle school state. Obviously, you had kids going to middle school state and bigger. Do you increase live, or is it more just like situational type stuff? I mean,
situational type stuff. Really a lot of situational stuff, and we will try to get some longer goes that'll simulate more matches, but the majority will be situational stuff. I think guys especially I started noticing this in college when we got closer to competitions. Guys were a little more worn out emotionally, physically, and they didn't. They would never shoot. You'd have them go live. They would never shoot. They wouldn't get into position. So we get in there, we try to fine tune it, and we do a little bit more position stuff.
Nice.
Yeah.
Very interesting, and it's good to hear it from. I know I poured you to a podcast with Ben Askren and Tommy Rollins, talking about a lot of the same stuff as far as youth wrestling, frequency, and I know they both have kids that are in it, so it's very interesting hearing it from guys that had enjoyed a lot of success on the mat, and kind of it's not as you don't need a whole lot of matches. It's also a lot about quality matches. Quality competition that's to your level. Someone like Christian Carroll doesn't, him going to the local tournaments not going to do him any good. He's just going to throw people around, and that doesn't do him any good, doesn't do anyone there any good. So you got to pick and choose your matches and make sure they're at that level. You don't want to send a first year kid to Fargo either to get throttled for 2 matches.
When he made his jump, he pulled back from competition a lot. Mm-hmm. We would work things. We worked his chest lock for 6-8 months. We spent so much time on that, and we worked hand fighting for months and not much else. And I think sometimes he got a little frustrated, like, "Hey, we're not working a lot." It's like, we're working quality stuff, and we just pulled back from competition, and we just sank ourselves into those things that I thought were important.
Yeah, he's about a year and a half almost. Obviously he had the knee surgery and stuff, but about a year and a half you didn't see him on the mat. I think he wrestled Fargo, or no, he wrestled Super 32. Then the next time it was actually about a year later at where was that at? That was at somewhere. That was at the Grappler, wasn't it? I think, which is about a year.
GFC,
yeah. I think that was about almost a year. A year absence, and you almost. I know as someone that's trying to keep tabs on all the best wrestlers and stuff, that you kind of almost lost him for a year. Like, is he still wrestling? did he move to Ohio? Did he? You never know. Like with guys like that, especially after an injury, where'd he go? Is he healed up? What? So, any other, I guess, youth wrestling things that kind of you see in Indiana, or you kind of recommend for parents getting their kids started or in the middle of that process?
I have a lot.
The
biggest thing for me is it's who are you listening to? Who are you listening to for your advice? And a lot of youth parents, and this is probably one of the biggest things I see in Indiana, is the youth parents, they get together like these little clans or whatever, and they listen to other youth parents. It's like, oh, Johnny over here, he won, a 10U state title. His dad must know it all. His dad must have it figured out. He won state. I'm going to do everything that guy says. And it's like his kid might be a horrible wrestler and just be very aggressive and have won state. And now you're listening to horrible advice. You're going down a horrible path. And eventually you get to high school and you're like, man, none of this worked. So it's like, what are your goals? If your goal is to be a youth state champion, then listen to someone who had a youth state champion. If your goal is to wrestle in college and be a Division I All-American, listen to somebody that was there. Do not listen to your neighbor down the street. Don't listen to this other youth dad who had an 8U state champ. Who cares?
Yeah.
Who cares? I don't know. There's too much emphasis on that and listening to the wrong people.
Yeah, no, that's very telling. You're not gonna in anything in life. You're not gonna go. You ask for advice from a doctor on your broken arm. You don't go to your neighbor who had a broken arm when he was in 6th grade.
Exactly, and it's if your goal is to be a youth state champion, I would change my whole coaching philosophy. I would just go out to the playground. I'd find the most aggressive kid. I would not teach him how to hand fight, because no young kids hand fight. I would just teach him headlocks, bulldogs, get him aggressive, and wrestle a ton of live. He'll win a youth state title. He'll be horrible in high school, but he'll win a youth state title.
Yeah, we've seen. I'm sure you see that in Pennsylvania and stuff where you grew up, but there have been a lot of those guys that you look through the ISWA books and you see the placers, and then you're like, man, this guy beat Jesse Mendez, or this guy beat, Christian Carroll, or, any of our top wrestlers. Like, where is that guy now? Where'd this guy end up? Did he, where is he now? And I've seen, I love going through those books and seeing, and then just kind of wondering what happened to this kid. Or you might see him back, you might make an appearance in high school once or twice and, falls off again. But yeah, there's a lot of those guys that do that, and then they're not in there for the long run. And you can kind of obviously probably trace it back to, we got to get to this high level right now, instead of realizing that it's that at 7 years old, it's a step to 8 years old, that kind of stuff. So pretty interesting. Kind of want to,
we do, when I my youth, we always ask them, how did you do? And I don't want to hear your wins and losses. I don't care. You could wrestle your best match you've ever wrestled before against Kyle Snyder and lose, and you still did well. You still progressed. You could wrestle your worst match against a horrible kid and win. The win and the loss, that's irrelevant when you're young. It really is. It's like, did you try good things? Were you trying to get to positions we worked on? Were you working on, setting your shots up, or you're just trying to be faster than the guy? There's so many things that you can use to determine how you did versus wins and losses. But most people, you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah. So
that's it. How did I do? I was 5-0. I did great. Yeah. I chin whipped 5 people, pinned them. Great.
So how do you get that to a kid? I know that's one of the hardest things as a coach is you see a kid wrestle a great match against a real good wrestler, maybe came up short, maybe got a call that didn't go his way, or maybe even if it was a kid that was at his level and that he made a couple of old mistakes but adjusted and had a good match. How do you get that through to a kid that, hey, you might have lost? I mean, a lot of people judge wins and losses. Like you said, you go 5-0, yeah, that was a good day, but did you really wrestle that well? Or you could have gone 3-2 and wrestled really well. How do you get that through to a kid that says, hey, you lost these 2 matches, good, but at the same time, it's you wrestled well. You made good choices. You got caught in a bad position one time, and that was the difference in the match, or stuff like that.
Yeah, it's tough, and that's why we spend so much time talking to our kids and trying to build that culture. And it goes back to, who are you listening to? Mm-hmm. I try to tell the parents a lot of times too. It's like, you don't know, a ton about wrestling. A lot of them haven't wrestled. It's, let the coaches coach. You should just be there for encouragement, love. Your kids look to you for, just for love. Just love the kid. Don't critique their wrestling. They probably did a million things wrong. Let the coach point out good things, work on some of the bad things, but every kid, they post it on Facebook, their neighbor down the street tells you what a great job you're doing. Then this person who placed at state in 8th grade, it's tough.
Yeah.
It's tough, but it goes down to, surrounding yourself with the right people and working on the right things.
Yeah. So, I want to compare Indiana and Pennsylvania a little bit. I know we were texting a little bit after the Pittsburgh Classic. I know you wrestled in that, correct? Back in the olden days. So when it was called the Dapper Dan. So, what are the biggest differences you see in Indiana versus Pennsylvania? And I know the one we were talking to about off the air was something I saw kind of in Ohio also, but what kind of differences do you see just in the culture from the ground up? What kind of things you see that are different, and obviously probably helps Pennsylvania be the best wrestling state?
Yeah, I mean, probably the biggest thing, and it goes back to, I always go back to some of the same things, is, who are you listening to? In Pennsylvania, they had, when I was there, I think it was 16 Division I schools. I think now they're down to like 12 or 13. They dropped a few, but they have the most Division I schools. They have those guys graduating and coaching youth wrestling, middle school wrestling, high school wrestling. You can't throw a rock in Pennsylvania without hitting a Division I All-American that coaches somewhere. And so you have a lot of really great advice, a lot of really great people that have, they realize, winning at the youth level is just not important. What are you doing? So it's, they're teaching really good technique. They have really good advice. They've been there before. In Indiana, I don't think can you name one Division I All-American that coaches a high school team? I don't think Indiana has any, right? There's not one. In Pennsylvania, there's hundreds. I mean, all over.
Not offhand.
Now, in Indiana, now you're starting to have some clubs with, Certis has been doing a great job over at Region. Mick Wick over there with Mauer Coughlin, they're doing great. There's some clubs that are really doing it, but there's not a lot of high school coaches that have been that level. And that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be a great coach, but you have some pretty dang good insight, and that's really going to help you out. So, I think Indiana's coming along. You're starting to get some, guys that have been on, Big Ten placers and, getting in the round of 12, just having some college experience at that level. I think Indiana Tech, Wabash, U of Indy, they're starting to turn out some guys that are pretty good that are going to stay around and help youth, high school, things like that. But that's really probably the biggest thing that has helped the culture in Pennsylvania versus Indiana. And I just think those guys, are successful because of that. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's one thing I noticed when I was in Ohio. Obviously, they have a lot of smaller. They have a few D1 schools, but they have a lot of small schools, and a lot of the guys I talked to were like, "Hey, my youth coach, my middle school coach, he wrestled at even a smaller school, even a Mount St. Joe, a John Carroll, whatever. Having that experience is huge." So now I'm trying to figure out if anyone All-American that was coaching high school. I'm looking through our list. Ben Whistle would have been probably one of the last ones. I think he might have wrestled. I know he coached in high school a little bit. I think he's an AD at Newcastle now. But I want to say he's the one I know has coached.
And I think what we talked about actually, Andrew Howe, wrestling, opening a club over there. I hear
that's the rumor on the street.
In Indiana, we need that. That guy's going to do amazing things. Like, we need that experience. We need Indiana guys that are like, wrestling in college to come back and coach. I don't know if Michich will. I don't know if Chad Red. I mean, those guys are Nick Lee. I mean, those guys need to come back and, start getting those guys clubs, high schools, whatever.
Yeah. Billy Maldonado, I think he's but Vega. Eric Douglas was coaching, I believe.
He's in administration now, though.
Yeah. But Davison, you have to go pretty far back, and, not that we've had a whole lot of All-Americans, but at the same time, that's very interesting. I never even thought about that as far as who's coaching and stuff. So back to our other questions. I guess that leads a little bit more to, obviously that's what helps make Pennsylvania, having that kind of those resources at the youth and high school level helps make Pennsylvania so good. Is anything else that kind of helps, keep them going, and they year after year they turn out more All-Americans and qualifiers, things like that, the success there is just, it's stupid, as far as how good they are year after year.
Yeah, I think that's the root of it. That is really the root of it. And when I was in Pennsylvania growing up, when I was younger, I was getting my butt kicked. And I remember, my freshman year, I didn't win the high school state. But I won the freestyle state, and I made the Fargo team, and I was nervous. I'm like, man, I got to go out and compete against everyone in the country, and I teched my way through Fargo, and I'm like, man. And everyone's like, damn, Pennsylvania's that good. Like, you don't realize when you go out, like, those other states just aren't on that level.
Yeah.
It's, you're around good wrestlers, guys that have been there that have a bigger vision. Mm-hmm. You don't have a lot of those garage coaches. I talk about that.
Yeah. Where and how, I guess, can Indiana improve? I mean, as far as I know we were talking about just, more clubs, more abilities to, more guys with that experience that had that high level experience coming back to help out. What can Indiana do, and where do we need to improve, and then how do you do it? I guess is an easier question.
I think we talked technically. I talked to you a little bit about, positionally, scrambling bottom. Those are, hand fighting. Once you're in a position, I think our Indiana guys are athletic, strong. They can get to legs. They can, get to position, but positionally, I think they struggle. But I think that, as a state, we need to work together better. I think there's just way too many egos where, you have this pocket doing good stuff, this pocket doing good stuff, this pocket, and they're just not working together a lot. I don't know, how to get that done. I don't think I have a good solution for it, but I do know, like, hey, there are some really good coaches in Indiana. We need to get all the coaches together. A lot of people have positives in different areas. Like, get together and work together. I'd love to do it. I just don't know. There's a lot of pushback, I think, with doing that. I don't know if it's the recruiting that goes on because of that. But I think that's, where we need to go. If we're not good at scrambling, who's the best scrambling coach in the state? Let's all learn to scramble and teach our kids and get on the same plan. If we're not good on bottom, who's the best at getting out on bottom? Let's, learn from them.
Yeah, definitely. That's one thing I have noticed, and obviously you coming in from a different area that, there are times when, like you said, there's pockets of guys, clubs are really good, but then they don't reach out, or, coaches don't want their kids, hey, don't go over to that guy because they're afraid of your kid being recruited, things like that. I know that is unfortunately an issue. I know Pennsylvania, is there a lot of recruiting going on, or is there a lot? I know I've seen some. I know like Zane Rutherford didn't wrestle his senior year or something because he transferred schools, but is there a lot of stuff going on there?
I think they're starting to get there. When I was growing up, there really wasn't. When I was growing up in Pennsylvania, we had the sectional, district, regional, state. That was our 4 series. And because a lot of the schools were small, and I know this is not legal in Indiana, but it just kind of gives you the mindset of Pennsylvania. We would do for sectionals, a couple of the schools would get together because, less guys to practice and practice together. After districts, more schools would get together. After regionals, so you would be practicing with, 10, 12 other schools sometimes in a practice room. You would be wrestling guys that you were going to face in the state tournament in practice all week. And their mindset was basically like, if you're the better guy, you're going to win. We're going to get better. We're going to be the best in the country. And as from a recruiting standpoint, it was like, if your kid goes over there to train or to work and he wants to transfer, it's probably because you're not doing something right. So get better as a coach. Give that kid more to offer. If you're scared he's going to leave, you feel like you're not good enough. That's what it was.
Mm-hmm. Who ran, I guess, and I've heard, Ohio does it, Michigan does that. Who runs those practices? Is it like 5 days a week, or is it like a couple of days a week? It's 5 days.
5 days. Every day leading up to the tournament. And the coaches, they would just take turns. Sometimes like, hey, this group of kids are going to go over here with this guy. It was, I don't know. There was no animosity. It was never, I don't know. It's just it was the expectation, and everyone just did it, and everyone got better.
Interesting. We even have trouble doing that in the off season when we're allowed to do that, multiple coaches, coaches saying, hey, go here and work out. There's there's a dozen kids from this school and you bring your kids here and stuff like that. I know it's always something people kind of are shy about because they don't want kids, they're afraid more of, getting recruited or, that kind of stuff. And I understand it a little bit as a coach. And I also you gotta obviously have confidence in your abilities, and, it takes a little bit more to transfer, but at the same time, it's, obviously they're going to do it no matter what. So
I'm not a big fan of the transferring. I definitely understand at some points, but if the kid doesn't want to be there, let him go. I kind of look at that. We've had guys, leave every program I've been at, every program in the country, Penn State, Iowa, wherever. There's going to be some kids that just not for, and they're going to leave. And there's more kids. Make other kids better. Develop kids. Just, and if you develop a kid and he leaves, wish him luck and develop the next kid. Just keep working, keep grinding.
No one's going to get better if a kid doesn't want to be there. The kid's not going to get better. It's not going to be good for the room. That kind of, all that kind of leads to, if you have a kid that's not happy there, then why, force him to be there? It's not going to be good for him, not going to be good for the culture in your room. Anything else? I guess I got through all my questions. I actually was fairly well prepared this time. I guess what other kind of advice, I guess, would you have for, other than just go to your place and train? That's the only place you should train. What kind of advice do you have, like, for parents, for kids, that kind of stuff?
Probably the biggest thing is I talk about consistency a lot, and consistency across the board, consistent with being consistent. You talk to a youth parent and you talk about someone else's kid. You say, hey, you should have some 500 matches. They agree with you. That kid, winning, he doesn't need to win right now. They agree with you. And then when it's their kid, well, my kid's different. No, he's not. Your message just changed. Consistently with practice. I'm not big on room jumping all the time, right? Like, I think we should get together, we should share, we should go, and we work on it. But some of these kids, I talked to you a little bit about the RTCs. The idea of it's great, but just, you have these kids, they just hit up 3 RTCs a week, and all they do is they go RTC, 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 and they just wrestle live, and they're not learning a system. We got to come up with a plan, stay consistent, work that stuff. I would like to see RTCs have a set progression plan of what the coaches want to, the cues, the moves, the positions we need to get better at, and work it every RTC every week leading up to Fargo, so that the coaches, when the kids go in, the kids know what the coaches are saying, and the coaches know what the kids know. I mean, they know what they've been working on, but they just go, they wrestle live. But just the consistency, with your work ethic, with your messaging, just consistency.
Yeah, that's definitely that's a good point on the RTCs. Do they have any types of RTC type things in Pennsylvania that you did, or is that more? I mean, was there anything similar that you had when you were growing up there?
There was not. There was not. We didn't have that set up. So I wish we would have. I think that still would have made them better, but
yeah.
Some points of emphasis. When we get to Fargo camp, everyone's coming in on a different page. You're taking, a few days to try to change everyone's style and work on these positions that some kids have never been in and have no idea what they are. Your cues are all over the place. It's just, to me, it's not as beneficial as it could be.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, and you're right with that. I know that in the past they've tried to give you like a little bit of a plan, but at the same time, it's hard to control what 15, 20 RTCs are doing every week. And if they're going to coach it the same, at least in a similar manner, I mean, it's almost like you need to have someone showing the techniques, this is the terminology. I mean, you go from school to school and you hear different terms for different moves, and, it's, it's wrestling. I mean, you got to be able to figure out, you got to have those same terminology, because you're going to have, I think you coached at Fargo last year, and I know some other coaches did. You're going to call a move this, and the kids are going to look at you like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, and I get the RTC. There's so many challenges, right? Like, everything sounds simple. Do this, and there are a lot of challenges. And I talked with one of the RTC coaches locally here, and they're like, we would love to do that, but our numbers would drop. Kids don't want to come in and learn. They want to come in, they want to wrestle live, hang out with their buddies, and get out. So he's like, we wouldn't be able to do it because we would lose too many numbers. So it's like, and then someone else is just going to have an open room, and the kids will flood over there and just wrestle live. That's what they want to do. And it's like, all coaches need to get on the same page. It's like, wrestling live all the time, it'll make you pretty good pretty quick, but your ceiling is so much lower if that's all you do.
Yeah, definitely. That's something that something coaches and kids need to hear, more or less. It's not a lot about live. I mean, everyone wants to go live. Going live's fun. I'm sure you'd agree that you'd rather go live than drill the same move over and over and over again. But at the same time, what's going to get you to that level, that higher level quicker, or actually the higher level that you want to get to, not really quicker. Obviously, like you said, if you go live, you're going to get there quicker, but you're going to have a lower ceiling.
I always tell our guys, wrestling live is fun, but you know what's more fun? Winning a national title. You hang that Fargo plaque on your wall, it'll be a lot more fun.
Yeah, definitely. And you'll thank your coach for drilling, hand fighting for 6 months and nothing else.
Yeah.
No, that's, I mean, it's interesting coming from you. And I didn't realize that you had like the Russian coach influence, which kind of helps facilitate kind of your feelings, but at the same time, Russia is pretty decent at wrestling, I'd say. They're usually pretty solid, and they don't start, I know a lot of coaches have tried to emulate it.
Being good's not a secret. It is out there. People just aren't willing to consistently do it. People ask me all the time, like, how do you get your guys so good at hand fighting? We work it all the time. You don't work something a little bit and then move on. But like most people, they can't stick with a plan if they don't see instant results.
Yeah.
It's going to take, doing it the right way, it's going to take years. Mm-hmm. It's going to take a long, long time. Most people just are not willing to put in the time.
So what's Penn State's secret? Why are they getting? Is it that same philosophy that only they can do it and their other schools aren't doing it?
I think that they don't beat their guys up as much. I think they keep their guys a little more fresh. I think the atmosphere of not overtraining. I think they spar more. Um, this is something I talk to our guys a lot about too. The good partner myth. The good part. Everyone in Indiana is like, we got to wrestle live against the best kids all the time. That's what Iowa does. They make their hammers wrestle each other all the time, leads to a lot of injuries, and it shuts down your offense. If you're wrestling a hammer every single day, you guys are going to stop scoring on each other, and you're going to go practices 0-0, 0-0, 0, and you're just not going to have any offense. Where you look at our high level guys, David Taylor, those guys, they do more sparring with high level guys. Like him and Dake will go in and spar because they can't score on each other a ton, so they spar. That's the closest thing to live wrestling, but you're still scoring, getting creative. You're staying a little healthier. You're still getting a cardio work. But I think a lot of these the programs you see really taking off, they're guys. The hammers will wrestle each other sometimes. You will, but not every day. You want to grab a guy and get a lot of successful live reps. You don't want to grab a hammer and just not score for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
I've been in the college wrestling rooms. You see that happen, and you see guys' offenses, they just go down. Their confidence, it's miserable. So anytime when I was coaching college and I saw kids start struggling, offensively or emotionally, mentally, whatever it was, I throw them one of the backups, man. Let them get some successful reps. Let him get some wins. Let him beat a guy up, start getting his creativity back. You don't need to wrestle an absolute hammer every time. And in our room, I'll separate our really good guys a lot of days. Go and work on, we worked on a chest lock. You're probably not going to hit it right away against the toughest kid. Go hit it on that guy.
So what's your definition of sparring? I mean, I'm pretty positive I know what you're talking about, but I guess for people that don't understand what exactly you'd consider sparring, is that like a 75% live go where you're letting the guy? I mean, what we do is like a play match and you give them about 50-75% resistance, make them work for it, take down or do whatever. Is that what you kind of?
Basically, so we kind of do. We separate our drills into 3 drilling. Static is just standing there, no variables, shooting your shots. High crotch double, high crotch double, high crotch double. That's when you're young. That's you spend the majority of your time doing that. We move into dynamic drilling. Dynamic drilling is you're moving a guy, setting him up. You're dealing with the variables of level change, pressure, movement, his feet moving, mine moving. But the outcome, right? You're going to hit a post high crotch double off. And then sparring is kind of the last phase. And as you go through your career, you move through these phases, and sparring should be kind of the furthest one out. But you're dealing with variables you don't know that are coming, right? So I'm going to set this shot up and I'm going to hit a high crotch. I don't know how I'm going to finish because that guy's going to react. I don't know if he's going to sit the corner, sprawl. I don't know if he's going to throw my head inside, and I'm going off of his reactions. So he's going to be dealing me different reactions, different looks, making me work for it, making me fight angles, making me have to regrip my lock, knee slide, fight angles, just all that stuff. So it's dealing off of variables that you don't know what's coming. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So, I mean, I know in our room, we call it a play match, give them, you're still having that success, but I'm making you work for it, making you switch off to a second or third option, like you said, stuffing ahead, sprawling, sitting, doing, maybe even trying to scramble a little bit, making you work for it. So I'm glad that's the definition I always had of it. But I mean, it's everyone, people out there that might not exactly understand, the terminology.
It is hard, even if you understand the concept of sparring, to become a good sparrer is so hard. But our high level guys, that's where they spend the majority of their time.
Yeah. And actually the guy that's, getting the move done on him kind of can learn a few things here and there about what's a better way to defend or, little things that they can pick up. I know I remember in college, I'd go in with a private workout with one of our coaches. We'd be basically progressing from as you said, those types of drills. And then all of a sudden we're just wrestling around, rolling around and, play match, sparring, whatever you want to call it, that kind of position. And I probably got a lot better from that last 15-20 minutes of doing that than I did, the first 15-20 minutes of doing just the static type drilling. So
And we talked to our guys a lot about too. It's like, if you're not getting work when you're getting drilled on, you're losing half of all of your practices. So you need to, what we talk to our guys about, it's like, you need to get work in. So you need to put, your hand placement, where do you turn your hips? Where's your chin go? Where do your feet go? You're not doing it hard enough for that guy to not be able to be successful. But even on static drilling, you need to put your hands where they need to go. You need to find your handles, your footwork. You need to do all that stuff. You should always be getting work when you're getting drilled on, whether it's static, dynamic, or sparring. And the higher the level of drill, the more you're going to get out of it. But yeah, you should always be getting something out of getting drilled on.
Nice. Some very good information. I guess anything else you have a platform right now. anything else you want to blast anybody or anything about, or how great IndianaMat is, since it way better than PA Power. No. Get them mad at me. Jeff can arrest me. I'll be nice to him. So any other,
you're doing a good job in promoting Indiana. I think the state's done a good job. It's really coming along. But there's just more we could do. And I hope people, start working together more and getting out there. And, there's a lot of really great coaches in the state. Get together. And
yeah, definitely. It's interesting hearing about more, especially someone like you saying, hey, get together. That's what we did in Pennsylvania, as far as, a lot of guys getting together, working together, becoming better, using, hey, this guy has, this coach is good at this and this coach is good at this, let's get together and, you coach, you teach this move today and we'll teach the others something else, the next day, that type of stuff. And that's not going to hurt anybody. Your guys are going to get, it's always nice to make new friends in the sport. I know a lot of my kids that had gone to different rooms or been on Fargo teams and stuff have a lot of friends through that, and, get to know guys, and, a lot of guys with like minds, and good things usually happen when you put guys with like minds and like mindsets together. So any parting words of wisdom? Got a good hour of youth wrestling talk and everything. Any other parting words of wisdom before we shut it down?
I'm good, man. Anytime you want me on, just let me know.
Yeah, well,
as I get out there.
I mean, I like talking youth wrestling. I love hearing different philosophies, especially from someone that came from out of state. And then, I mean, you have that point of view that you're here now. You've been in Tennessee, you've been in Georgia, you've been, you grew up in Pennsylvania, and you have a lot of different avenues of views that you've seen, and coming here. And obviously, I think Indiana's getting better. It's a matter of, going to Pennsylvania this past couple weeks. It's almost been a month now. It was very interesting, and it wasn't really eye opening, but is one of those things that's very interesting to see our guys go against them. And there's some things that we, kind of exposed a few things, like you said, like some scrambling issues, some things on top and bottom that they did differently, and they were just a little bit better than us, and end up making matches that I think when we were wrestling them, I think we were equal to them, or maybe even a little bit better on our feet. But once it got to the mat, or some other positions, we they were a little bit better than us. So you agree? Or
yeah, and I want to, like, we got out scrambled bad. We could not finish any leg attacks against those guys. Outside of a select few people. So how many coaches, when they saw that, came up with a plan for scrambling and started working on it?
Yeah.
So you did nothing. So you compete, you see what we need to work on, and no one works on it. Mm-hmm. So this is a little story. We I forget when it was. It was right before Christian Carroll won Super 32s. We took a team, some of our guys, Christian Carroll, Evan Bates came with us, a couple guys. We went over to Pennsylvania, and we trained at Quest club with Stouts were there and stuff. And Christian got beat up a little bit, and our guys, just weren't good scramblers. We came back and we worked just scrambling all the way from then, which was like a month and a half, until GFC. Christian ends up winning GFC. We worked it a little more. He wins Super 32s. I mean, but we saw what we needed to work on, and then we came up with a plan, and we worked it consistently. Very few people are doing that.
how often do you get? I know you were. I think you were supposed to send some kids to Arizona, but I know that last year I think, but there's some flight issues. How often do you send kids, or do you go with a group of kids to Pennsylvania or somewhere to you know to learn from other guys?
Not enough.
Not
not
enough.
not enough. That's something I really want to do. So I was commuting to my club an hour and a half drive each way when I first opened the club. We just moved this last summer, so it's not even been a year yet. So it's been kind of hectic and COVID. But that is something I'm huge into. I want to start doing that. I talked to Sanderson's brother out in Utah a lot lately, getting a trip out there. Want to go back to Pennsylvania. I talked with Larkin down at Valiant Prep. We were supposed to take a group. We boarded the plane. They shut the plane down, and that fell apart. But yeah, I want to do that a lot. I think that's really important. And that's not just for the athletes. When I go, most of the time I'm running workouts. I love to watch people run workouts. I want to go down to Valiant Prep and I want to see, not only the technique, but, the drills that they're doing, the cues that they're learning, teaching, how they talk to the kids. I can learn so much from that stuff. I love doing that. So I go for the kids. I go for myself. It's awesome. But yeah, we need to do it more.
I saw Larkin and Cejudo were at Pittsburgh, and David Taylor was working with Larkin's son, teaching him, and it was just like they were in a high crotch position, teaching some defense, and watching them pick Taylor's brain was pretty. It's pretty interesting just sitting there watching. You have two pretty high level wrestlers in Larkin and Cejudo, and they're asking David Taylor questions. How do we do this? And Taylor's going over, and it was interesting just to see the nuances of put your hand here, but don't, if you put it here, this is what he can do. If you just move it here, literally 2 inches, you're in a lot better position, that kind of stuff. And just seeing those people at that high level work with each other and, ask questions and, kind of almost bounce ideas and philosophies, go back and forth in a relaxed environment. It's pretty neat to see.
Yeah. They let their ego go. True high level people let their egos go and you learn. I mean, I'll pull some of we have some pretty advanced middle schoolers. These guys, and they don't compete a lot, so a lot of people don't know how good they are. But I'll see them do something or string something together or use a different setup for a different. I'll pull them aside and be like, dude, show me that. And these are 7th grade kids. I don't care. I don't know everything. I don't know. I'm gonna learn everything I can though. And the sports evolved so much. I was really good when I was coming out of high school or even college in 2006. I was ranked in the world. And, the sport has evolved so much in 15 years since then. If I still have the mindset that like, hey, I knew everything in 2006 and I haven't moved past it, I'd be a horrible coach. The sport has evolved and it still is. It's evolving so much, but you got to let your ego go and learn.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. Especially, I mean, do a lot. You need to invite Valiant Prep up, especially around IPO time, so they can come back again. So no, so
Talking to
great.
them a lot actually about, yeah.
They said they might be coming back. I don't know. I talked to them a little bit at Pittsburgh. Hopefully they brought some hammers, and I know they even said like, man, we got our butts kicked, and we didn't know we got our butts kicked, and it was an eye opener, and end up less than a year later they went through Fargo and just killed people. So that tells you the focus. I mean, kind of like how you did. I mean, that's kind of what they do is they wrestle some national level events. They don't wrestle a lot. They wrestle every 4 to 6 weeks, and they train a lot and end up having a pretty good group of kids. And especially when you have guys with high level experiences and things like that. So, I guess we're gonna get off here. We've been here an hour. I'm sure you have other things to do, but we had quite a. I don't know if you're reading any of the comments. You have quite a few fans, no naysayers, so that's pretty good. I banned all of them. So, but appreciate you jumping on here, and maybe we'll do it again sometime and talk about youth wrestling. It's always good to hear people's views and stuff, and maybe we'll get some other people on here in the future. So with that, we're going to get going. You can stay on here. We can talk a little bit afterward. So thanks for joining us. We'll be back. I don't know when, but stay tuned on your Facebook.